Hi there, and welcome to Plant CEO. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome Louie Psihoyos, the Executive Director of Oceanic Preservation Society. Hey, Louie, how's it going?
Really good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Pleasure to be here.
And whereabouts are you zooming in from at the moment?
I'm in the Bay Area, a little town called Sausalito, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Very nice. So we've got a lot of things to talk about today. Let's start with Racing Extinction. It basically recently won the best green film of the decade. You must be really over the moon about that because I just watched it recently and I think it's amazing. Can you give a small sort of synopsis of what it is for the people who haven't seen it yet?
Yeah, no, it's really a film about, I guess, calling it to attention to the Anthropocene, the sixth mass extinction on the planet, the one that we're going through right now. There's been 5 major extinctions in the history of the planet. We're going through one right now. And it's really, that's kind of like Act 1. Act 2 is, and 3 is like, what are the solutions? How do we, address that? How do you take this existential crisis and actually turn it into something that's, potentially a positive? That's how we reframe it. It's like, okay, we know that there's a lot of issues going on, but when you look at the solutions, they're really upgrades, to almost every part of your life. Certainly, I got to think that thing that we'll be talking about here is, when people say, well, what can I do? Maybe I can't afford solar panels or an electric car, or, work is too far away to or it's not convenient to travel. But the one thing that everybody can do is change what's on your plate. If you're not a vegan or a vegetarian, the best way to change the world, change what's on your plate, because almost every major problem that we have, climate change, freshwater pollution, greenhouse gases, habitat destruction, species extinction, all that's related to what we're eating. And people, I think you see in the film that you're starting to make that connection to people. And people say, well, I'm just one person. But, one person, that's a carnivore, eats about 10,000 animals in their lifetime. And so you're not just eating those animals, you're eating all the infrastructure that, keeps them alive, all that land. You have to put it like 6 times the amount of protein in that animal to get, 1/6 of the protein from the plants. It's like it'd be like going to the bank and say, here's a $20 bill, and all you get back in exchange is like $3. That's kind of what we're doing to the environment, because our supply and demand economy. When Adam Smith, the guy who wrote Wealth of Nations, he wrote it back in 1776 and came up with supply and demand, and that's been taught in every school, economics class for the last 250 years. They didn't factor in externalities because they didn't. Back then, Adam Smith couldn't imagine an ocean that would be depleted of fish. He couldn't imagine that, there'd be so much, burning of fossil fuels that it would change the atmosphere the way it has. We created this pollution blanket around the planet that's now not just affecting the oceans, affecting the water systems, affecting the land, affecting what's in our body. Millions of kids have asthma problems, all because of this pollution blanket from the fossil fuel industry. And part of that's because of our food system as well is very tied into that. And if we started to think about more efficient ways of delivering protein and moving around the planet without fossil fuels, or minimizing it to a very little bit, it's an upgrade for everybody. When you adopt a whole foods plant-based diet, you live about 10 to 12 years longer without chronic disease. How many parents do we have? Or maybe people listening, they have, they're pre-diabetic or diabetic, or they have prostate cancer, or they have, beginning signs of dementia. I'm working on a film right now. We'll stick with Racing Extinction, but I'm working on a film right now about a doctor here in Sausalito who's trying to reverse Alzheimer's with, one of the pillars is a whole foods plant-based diet. And it's actually showing that it's working in the early stage, Only about 26 people have been through the cohorts, but the early signs are showing that in about, I think it's 68% of the people with early stage Alzheimer's is actually reversing it. There's been billions and billions and billions of dollars of drugs spent over the last several decades to try to figure out what's a drug that can reverse Alzheimer's. The best they can do is, I think it was Eli just a couple of weeks ago announced that they found a drug, and it'll be $1 billion drug that can only slow the decay of a person's brain, like by about 6 months. But a whole foods plant-based diet, along with other, we can talk about it later, but the idea is that you put the right fuel in the tank, you can actually reverse a disease that's on track to become our most deadly and our most feared. The worst thing you can do is lose your mind, right? When you lose your memory, you lose everything. And the idea that it's so simple and so counterintuitive, because we've been taught that you need animal products to be big and strong and have mental acuity and have virility. And in fact, it's just the reverse. So, I would, submit to anybody listening that, when you watch Racing Extinction, it's reframing the argument from like, what do I have to give up to what do I gain? And what you gain is your life. You get your life back. There's so many people. You can reverse about 80 to 85% of the chronic diseases that we have by diet and exercise. But we have this feeling that you need drugs and technology to fix a problem that's really just the wrong fuel in the tank.
Yeah. I've also been speaking to some doctors who focus on whole food plant-based diets. And they are also agreeing with your analogy on that, because as well as Alzheimer's, they're saying that, but also type 2 diabetes, heart disease is all reversible if you do it in the right way with a balanced lifestyle. So completely in agreement with you on that.
Yeah. And I've been following the work of Dr. Dean Ornish in Sausalito here, and it's his 4 pillars are whole foods, plant-based diet, exercise, social support, so that people get together, and social support and relaxation, reducing your cortisol levels. A lot of stress in our lives. And if we can, meditate, slow down, have quiet time, that's his 4 pillars. Yeah. And I would add sleep to that. I mean, knowing what I heard from other people, that, your risk of any kind of dementia goes up by many factors if you have less than 6 hours of sleep.
Yeah, it's also taking the learnings of these longevity diets and the blue zones, right, of where people have been brought up, is with the communities aspects that they're in, but predominantly also the diet being mostly vegetables.
Yeah, and Dan Buettner, the guy who was the National Geographic fellow who popularized the Blue Zone diet, is a friend of mine. I talked to him last week. And he just basically sold his company to Adventus, which is I guess it's an insurance company, right? The health insurance company. But it's, there's 5, like you said, there's 5 known blue zones, right? Places where people live the longest without chronic disease. 95% of their calories come from a whole food plant-based diet. But the only blue zone that's in America is in Loma Linda. And I spent a week down in Loma Linda, and this is where it's 7-day Adventist, so Adventist healthcare. Okay. About 9,000 out of the 24,000 people that live there are Adventists, and their diet is essentially a whole foods plant-based diet. There's some people that are on the fringes, of course, but generally, you go to the equivalent of a Whole Foods down there. And hopefully you don't have Whole Foods where you are, but
we do actually. You do, yeah.
Okay, well, you go to the equivalent of a Whole Foods, like their high-end market there. They don't even have a meat counter. You can't get it. They don't sell it. They have milk, but it's nut milks, and the cow's milk is on the lower shelf. It's all kind of reversed. But they do it because of religious reasons. They take the Bible literally in Genesis, where God was supposed to say, let the fruit of thy tree be thy meat, and they take that literally. And so what's interesting is you go to church there, and I've been to church there, and you see like 90-year-olds skipping to church hand in hand, like a couple. You see there's 300 people that are 80 years or older at the gymnasium. And these aren't just like little, strutting around like little hands. One guy in his 70s is on the parallel bars spinning around like I could never do ever, even in my prime. It's you go to the parks and there's people doing group exercise. There's, it's part of that community support thing, but it's a very healthy community. And it's, that's social. Again, there's the idea of societies being together. When you're healthy with other people, it really helps. But then to see this, like the physical expression of a whole community living this lifestyle, it's really, really exciting, because you don't see that in most other cities in the world. It's like a special community. Now, here's the fascinating thing. I call it like the tale of two cities. I'm actually covering this for a film I'm working on. But if you Loma Linda is on the south side of Interstate 10. It's a big highway that goes from east to west all across America. But on the south side of Interstate 10 is Loma Linda. On the north side is another community called San Bernardino. So on the south side, you have one of the healthiest communities in the entire world. Right. And on the other side is one of the unhealthiest populations in the state of California. Wow. And San Bernardino is where they had the first McDonald's. If you want to get fast food, you have to go over there. Now, this is the cool thing. There's Dean and Aisha Shirzai. They're two researchers that were interested in the lifestyle, and they wanted to open up. They opened up a brain health clinic at the hospital there. There's a world-class hospital at Loma Linda University, and so they opened a brain health and Alzheimer's clinic. And Loma Linda, nobody came. They had to go over and recruit people from neighboring communities like San Bernardino. And now, out of the 5,000 people that they've had come through the clinic so far in the last 5 years, only 13 of them have been vegetarians. Wow. So when you think about less than half of the population is vegetarian, but so you would expect half the people almost to be vegetarians, but they don't. It's almost impossible to find them there. So listen, and I don't know if you have a 20 or a 30-year-old on the call, they probably think, well, you're going to live forever. Brain health, that's something my grandfather had. But 1 out of 3 people in the world are going to be, because Alzheimer's is on the rise because of the unhealthy living and diets that we have. So 1 out of 3 people on this call, and assuming that they're not all vegans, let's just say one third of the population and around the world is going to be affected by Alzheimer's, meaning you're either going to get it yourself, your mate's going to get it, or you're going to be taking care of a parent that has it. And it'll be devastating to your own personal economy, because it's a disease that kills your parents or yourself slowly over 10, 12, 15 years. And it's emotionally, I've been hanging around these families, many families that have it. It's devastating to the family. It's devastating to your mate. It's emotionally draining, financially draining, to the whole economy. It's draining. So it's not just like, sorry?
And also just imagine the impact that's going to have in the future if it continues this way to the health systems right across the world.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like the more people that know about this, that there's a solution, that you actually have more energy, you can get all the protein and more that you need from plants, and we're probably getting ahead of ourselves, but we did a film called The Game Changers, which is on Netflix now, and that's about plant-based super athletes. And we used super athletes because a lot of the data showed that men were the obstacle to a plant-based diet, because they're taught that, brought up and marketed to that you need to eat meat to be, manly, to have endurance and strength and virility, when in fact is just the opposite. One of the things we do in the film is it's not a scientific study with a great population. We only used a few collegiate athletes, but these are really healthy people with their cardiovascular system is, they're top athletes. And we sent them off to, we gave them a meat-based meal, and there's a device that you can put on your leg. It's basically a computer that measures nocturnal erection. And so it has these basically a ring that goes around the base of your penis and one at the top, and it measures nocturnal erections. Every guy, a normal, healthy, functioning guy, this is like wet dreams. It's just your body getting blood to an important organ. And so the guys strapped this on after a meat-based meal, went to sleep, and the difference, I can't remember, I think it was like a 10.4% bigger, harder erection than the same people with the meat meal. And then this is the clincher, was a 350% longer duration erection. And, I've been to, I just can't, that scene is just so funny to me, because it's so, like, to watch the expressions, because it is kind of embarrassing to talk about.
I actually went to the premiere of the film in London, and there was definitely a few giggles in the audience in that scene. But yeah, since, I've met NIMA, DELGADO, and Patrick, and Dotsie, by the way, is coming on the show soon. This month, actually. So amazing athletes.
Oh yeah, and I love those people you're talking to. DMI is amazing. Never had a bit of meat in his entire life, and he looks like
he looks amazing.
Like Captain America. I mean, he's just a physical specimen. And you think, well, how agile can a guy like that be? But he has like a vertical jump of like 5.5 feet. Wow. He can go from like the ground to like almost 2 meters up on one hop. He's like a gazelle, and he's such a sweet guy too. And,
I was gonna say, actually, he's very humble as in terms of like his physique and the way he goes about himself. He seems very level-headed. He's a really great guy from my meeting with him as well.
Yeah, and Dotsie, almost 40 years old when she gets a silver medal in the Olympics. I mean, that's like, she's
amazing.
That's like 20-year-olds or teenagers, right? And she's kicking their butt.
Yeah, for sure. So keeping with the game changers for a moment, that film had a huge impact, like you say. And huge success, huge noise, and James, who I've also been in touch with, so he's come on the Joe Rogan show. He's defended the film very well. I think it's great that he was able to do that against some of the counter arguments of the film. But typically, what are the sort of common questions that you're getting from the film?
I haven't heard much or any negative flack. I saw the Joe Rogan episode. I was on Joe Rogan. We didn't talk about the game changers. We talked about other things. By the way, I love Joe Rogan. One of the best interviewers I've been with. I love him. But I heard that he just took down the episode with James. And I don't know why. Somebody just pointed out last night, it's me from Australia, and it's like, I've got so much on my plate, I'm not gonna get into that fray. But a lot of people are, what's interesting is that the film came out, in the first 30 days that film was on Netflix, The Game Changers, searches for plant-based diet went up 350% worldwide.
Right.
And I think that was October of the last year, whatever it was, a year and a bit ago,
So by the way, let's not forget that impact that has to the whole industry, right? With those searches going up, what happens to the plant-based industry with the food companies? It's massive.
Yeah. Massive. A lot of my friends are involved in that business. How do we market to the people that want to live healthier and longer, and have more virility and strength. And they said they had to add, new lines onto their factories after the film came out, like their business spiked. And then of course, about 3 months later, we got hit by COVID. And so that, let's say with like Impossible Foods, who does the Impossible Burger, or Beyond Burger, they were doing a lot of restaurant meals, and then that just crashed. So then they had to pivot to grocery stores, which they've done very, very well.
Yeah.
But they told me, both heard from Ethan Brown, and Pat Brown is a friend who's the founder of Impossible. Amazing man. I mean, just a little bit of digression. So here you have a guy, he's a Stanford professor, working with teams like biomedical teams, trying to, one of his the problems he was solving or did solve and got awards for was how some cancers infect other cells. So this is the level that he's doing. He's like, like cancer research at the top level. He takes an 18-month sabbatical, like in middle age, and tries to figure out what can I do more with my life to have more impact? Because he realized that as long as people are eating this way, it's going to be, not only crashing the biosphere, but, still affecting people. So what's the, so he, after 18 months, he figured out the most important thing that he can do with his life is figure out how do you get plants to taste like meat? Because, until you solve that issue, people are going to still continue to get sick. So that's why he started Impossible. And, it's such an amazing story, that you have this high level functioning human that even tries to even up his own game. And then he's, obviously the business is doing extremely well. And, it's interesting that this is one of those solutions, right? I mean, if people are going to eat meat, here's this alternative. And I've got friends that are working in cellular agriculture now. Like, you can, well, first of all, like, Pat says, he's such an incredible person, but he says that, the cow's not tasting any better, and we're improving our flavor profile every week, and they can make it cheaper. They can put, they're now, you don't have to raise a whole cow to get to get meat. You can have plant-based meat that tastes better and is healthier for you. It's healthier for the environment. It's a win for everybody, your personal health, the animals, and the environment. And it's, the trick is to get it a little bit cheaper. And once the people are finding out that once you're on parity for let's call it the real animal, whatever that is, people all they want is just a little bit, taste a little bit better and be a little bit cheaper. And that's the tipping point, and we're at that point right now where, they can make it cheaper, maybe not with cellular agriculture, but it'll be close once they get it to scale. I think there's so many great things, great stories. Last week, 11 Madison, a very famous restaurant.
That's right, yeah.
In New York, they decided, that their whole menu is plant-based now. It's huge. It's huge. So, people are, we're starting to see that hockey stick curve of, it used to be like, oh, look at, carbon dioxide, look at, all these problems, hockey stick. Now on the good side, the solution side, we're starting to see those issues. When we did Racing Extinction, one of the things we did in that film is we wanted to show that electric cars, this is like 2011, 2012, when we were making that film. And we wanted to show that, electric cars were coming.
Hi, this is Leilani Munter from Racing Extinction. We wanted to share with you some extra footage from our trip to the Tesla factory that you didn't see in the film, as well as some bonus footage from the day that we picked up the Model S that would eventually become our mobile projection vehicle. Enjoy.
Where Iron Man lives.
Yeah.
The real life Iron Man?
I mean, how much do we tell him about what we want to do to his car? That's what.
I think we tell him all of it. Sure. He's Elon Musk.
It's not like the world needs another car company, but the world does need electric cars. And if the big car companies aren't going to do it, well, somebody's got to do it. And I wish I didn't have to do it. So look at it this way, if Tesla doesn't succeed, the conclusion of the car industry is going to be that electric cars are a total failure.
Oh, this is a fun car, Elon. So this is basically NASCAR, you guys. We go in circles like this.
What was really important with Model S was to create an electric car that was better than any gasoline car, to get rid of the misconceptions that people had around electric cars.
This is like an electric race car.
I mean, an automobile magazine put it up against an M5 and it won.
Do you look at the world through the eyes of the future, looking back and say, well, we're nuts right now, we're insane?
I think we are currently doing something very, very dumb, which is to run this experiment on how much CO2 the ocean's atmosphere can hold. And to the degree that we exceed that capacity, will do tremendous damage to the environment. Tautologically, there has to be some sort of sustainable means of transport in the future.
I think we want to put in an order for a car today.
Excellent,
actually.
we'll take one. By the way,
so-
beeping at you because you're pressing both pedals, because
That's a
that is a
race car
it is a race car driver thing, yeah, exactly.
We do left foot braking. So, is there a way for me to override that so that when I buy one, it's not beeping at me all the time?
We took a Model S and we turned it into like a Bond car. You know, it was the first car in the world to have an electroluminescent paint job. We could change the color of the car with a flick of a button. We had a FLIR camera that came out of the front. It's a FLIR camera is a forward-looking infrared camera, so it could see the invisible world of greenhouse gases like CO2 and methane. Then we had, out of the back end, we had a projector, a 20,000 lumen projector on a robotic arm, so we could show those images of the carbon dioxide in real time, and we could project them onto skyscrapers or mountains. The mobile projection vehicle has almost become like this living, breathing thing. I want people to look at this vehicle and think, well, how is that being done? You know, how is that possible?
We knew we wanted to make a mobile projection vehicle, but no one had ever done that to a Tesla. We started off by adding a 15,000 lumen video projector that's mounted on a robotic arm that deploys up out of the back of the car. There's a electroluminescent paint job, which is the first of its kind. So the paint actually emits light, so we can do different patterns. One of the main patterns is to represent the pattern on a bioluminescent fish in the ocean. And then in the front of the car, we installed in the frunk a thermal imaging camera that pops up out of the front and has a special filter on it that allows you to see carbon dioxide emissions.
So that's legal. You have to step
That's
it
legal?
off just until you push that. That works, right?
That's legal.
I love this car as much as I love any of my race cars. I feel like I'm driving the future around. And to get to drive that really, really cool Model S Tesla that is unlike any other on the planet, it's so amazing.
By bringing nature to the city, we're hopefully able to inspire people to actually help save these creatures. So we were interviewing Elon for the film, and I remember it was October, and he, wrote back and said, "Hey, can we change the interview till the next quarter?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Well, I could go bankrupt." And so now he look what he's done. This is that's also the beginning of that hockey stick curve. He made a better car. The woman that drove our getaway car in that movie, she was she was a race car driver, Leilani Munter, so she's used to driving fancy cars at 200 miles an hour, quite literally, like at racetracks in America like Daytona and Talladega. And we pulled that car off the lot before we had it modified, and she turned to me and said, "Every other car on the road just became a relic."
Yeah.
And now, but now you look at, Elon's now the, second or third richest guy in the world. He's motivated all the other major car companies to, introduce or get rid of their internal combustion engines. So, I mean, the world changes in these like 10-year increments. And, when people say, oh, well, there's not enough vegans, it's like, just wait. These technological revolutions or these, these social changes, major social changes, and some of they only take some of them 10 years. That's about like 12, 13 years ago. 2007, we were typing the hitting the number key, 2 keys 6 times on our flip phones to text a capital C. And there's a famous picture taken in New York on a building on a rooftop from Broadway, looking down at the Easter parade. On Fifth Avenue, and it's all horses except for one car. 1900 Easter Parade, New York City. 13 years later, it's just the opposite. Is find the horse. And people say, oh, well, look at the cars as such a problem. But remember, horses, there was 20,000 tons of manure going on the streets every day. You were dragging the manure into your business, your house, your school. There's flies. I had a great grandmother that lived in New York at that time, and she said it was, it's New York stunk. It was just full of horses and all the crap and manure and 20,000 tons of urine going out in the street every day too. I mean, it's just you could smell New York City from 6 miles away, the sailors said when they came into the city. So it's a much different world. So these 10-year increments, I think we're at that point. I think in another 15, 20 years to get a burger from a cow might be like, okay, you can go around back with the smokers, maybe,
Yeah, it's going to be very different. Yeah. And I think even if you look at in this 10-year period, in this last decade, there's been $6 billion worth of investment going to these plant-based companies. So, and more will come, and we'll start to see financial institutions, pension funds, because a lot of the big funds are being scrutinized because they're not doing enough around sustainability. So this change will start to happen faster, I see.
Yeah. I think our films are all designed to sort of accelerate that change. That's what we're about. Our organization, I tell the crew when we're making, I said, we're not making movies, we're trying to start movements or jumpstart the movements. That's how I look at it, is we're just putting jumper cables on something that needs a little bit more life into it.
Yeah. And did you ever take the car back to Elon Musk? Because, the car's amazing with all, the gadgets, the James Bond gadgets, if you like, on it. Did he ever see it, or did he see a video of it, or did you hear back from what he thought as what you've done with it?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure if I'm allowed to talk about it. I don't know. We might have a non-disclosure about it, but let's just say the car's been modified since we got it. Well, I can say this, we had some really smart people working on the car. I mean, the car was just full of tech. We had to take out the whole back, like the headliners, the stuff that made it like a luxury car. We had to like dismantle it. We had all this electronics in the back, and Elon, had his way with it. And so I went to his house a few months ago, and he had the back seat was back in. We had there's like a tech person that sat on a boat cushion with a seat belt. That's how you did. That's sort of squeezed in, and the seats are back in, the headliner's back in, and all electronics are in a cup now. the cup holders.
Oh wow! Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because if you look at his, the new sports car that he's releasing soon, he has spoken about putting the SpaceX package, which is basically having the rockets on the back of this thing that is already insanely fast. So I can't, and he's a big fan of James Bond, right? When he's got and so am I, by the way. And with the sort of Easter eggs that you have with the the Lotus car that goes under the water. So yeah, I could see him adding a lot more other things to that.
Yeah, no, he's a brilliant guy. I mean, he's incredible, and he's definitely jump started that whole industry. And people, I think he doesn't get a fair shake, because listen, I think people are. Whenever you do something that's radical, whenever you're changing the world as dramatically as he has, you're going to get a lot of trolls, and he's got I think his unfair share of that, because there's people betting against him. The shorts are, he's the most shorted. Tesla was the most shorted, company on the stock exchange for years. And now I think all those shorts have gone away. They've all lost their shorts, betting against him. And he's relentless. I spent years in the automobile industry. I used to work for the business magazines when I lived in New York, and I'd fly out to Detroit, and I knew, for about a 10-year period, 15-year period of time, I was hanging out with the Lee Iacocca's, Roger Smith from the CEO of General Motors. I knew these people, and they weren't very innovative at all. They were horrible. They didn't even drive their own cars. They didn't know how crappy they were. I remember I was, and I know we're getting off on a little bit of a tangent here, but it sort of gives you an insight of the way this is kind of look at the metaphors of the meat industry as I'm talking here. Like you go up to, Roger Smith's house, and it was like, I would never, when I rented a car, I rent an American vehicle. And back then, this is the early 80s, they were horrible. The rental car, pieces would be broken off. There would be it was just a few thousand miles and they're falling apart. And the Japanese at that point were eating our lunch. And, whenever I got to rent a car, I would get a Japanese car. And, to try it out, because I was thinking, which car could I buy? I pulled up in a Japanese car to Roger Smith's house thinking, and I didn't even think of I should get a General Motors. I wasn't pandering to him, but those PR people were horrified. And then, I know it's a tangent, but I remember Ross Perot, a famous American, General Motors had just bought EDS, his company, and Ross Perot is from the South, and he goes to me, he says, and he's like, he just made $4 billion off the sale or something crazy. Yeah. And he's now on the board, and he speaks his mind. He says he says, Roger doesn't even know how horrible his car is. You ever ride with him? I said, yeah. He says, you ever see him drive his own cars? No. It's because something breaks and you got a whole cadre of mechanics that are going to fix it. So the people at the top don't even know how bad their own companies are, because they're the echo chamber within their own system doesn't allow them to see how crappy their vehicles are. I think the same thing kind of goes on with the food industry, where people, you have chefs that are brought up, cooking meat, and they don't hear the chatter, or they think that we're the radical left. But they don't understand that there's this chatter is, the humming of a tidal wave coming to take over the world, in a most positive way. There's people that are looking for a better source of protein, a cleaner source of protein, but that's better for the environment. It's better for, the animals. It's better for the environment. And if they don't hear that message, they're going to get steamrolled. It's just like General Motors did, and now they're playing catch up. General Motors had the EV. I photographed the first one that came off the line, whenever that was in the 1980s. They had a sense that there was something back, but they were too ingrained with the old model. And I tell you, the world is changing very rapidly right now.
And they killed that project. By the way, I'm a big, automobile guy as well, and so happy to talk to you about cars. I used to actually have a kit car, believe it or not, which was a fiberglass car that had a donut engine and all this. So yeah, I had a lot of fun when growing up. But yeah, back to GM, I think they were the first ones to have the EV car and EV1, right? And they killed that project off. And I don't know if it was pressure from the fossil fuel companies that made them kill it off, and there was a documentary after that, wasn't there? But now they're definitely all in.
Who Killed the Electric Car? Chris Payne. And one of the cars that was in that documentary was, I had a Toyota RAV fully electric car. This is a 2002 Toyota RAV. I had, probably one of 3 electric cars in the state of Colorado where I was living at that time. And I was powering it with 120 solar panels off my roof. And I went from having because I was running my organization, the Oceanic Preservation Society, out of my backyard studio in my home. I had about a dozen people working for me, but I had servers and, probably a dozen computers. And it was costing about $1,000 a month for electricity. And I went from a $1,000 electric bill to getting a check from the electric company because I was overproducing of about, depending on the month, between $200 and $600. And this is, back in 2007. I thought I had discovered, I couldn't believe how the car had a pickup. It had a pretty good range for that time. 2002 car. It had about 120-mile range. It was like the EV1, but it was with Toyota. All the manufacturer, if you're going to sell a car in Colorado at that time, I think 1% of the cars that they produced were supposed to be zero emission vehicles. Oh, okay. And so this was all the major companies had to create vehicles, and then a new I think it was Reagan came in and destroyed it. I might be wrong on that, but the government changed, and so that they all stopped their electric car market. But there's only about 1,500 of them that were imported into the United States, and I had one of them. Wow. And but the license plate on my car said VUS. It stood for Vehicle Using Sun. It was the opposite of an SUV.
Oh yeah, nice. Very good. Maybe that should be a new term that's coined going forward. Going back to Racing Extinction and some of the moments that basically resonated with me quite a lot. There was quite a few. But one of the ones was the scene where you had the shark that was trying to swim, but it had its fins cut off, and you subsequently then exposed during the undercover operation, the finning operation in Hong Kong. Basically really shocking to see that amount of fins just in one warehouse. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it was Sean Heinrichs that shot the underwater stuff of the shark that was finned, and we were with him in Hong Kong. We were actually on the way. We were going to be going to, I believe it was Taiwan, to photograph a shark finning operation that we knew about. And then Paul Hilton, another activist that was with us at the time, a partner of Sean, come back, and he had just gotten up on the roof, and he showed me some little thumbnails of what he had done. And I thought, oh my God, we don't have to go to Taiwan. Let's just go down the street. So that's how that sort of evolved. And then in the film, we did Paul, the crazy individual, photographer, activist, worked for Greenpeace. And, he wanted us to go to a town in China. I forget the name of it, but he wanted us me to pose as a shark oil dealer, because they were killing endangered sharks there. And there was, I think, 7 illegal shark finning operations. Not just finning, it was whale oil. And they were selling literally hundreds of thousands of pounds of illegal, endangered sharks. And I was posing as a buyer. That was scary, because you just don't know who these people are, and you're not in a big town. You've lost all your kind of infrastructure. There's somebody from the embassy that might be able to help you. That was scary. But the crew. I mean, some of the stuff now, I don't know if I would have the guts to do what we did back then, like when we did that film, and a film called The Cove. That's you couldn't. I don't think you can get into anywhere if you want to, but The Cove is, when we went there was a lot of police, but we had their timing worked out of how long it took to get from the police station to the Cove. We had escape routes, mapped out. Now it's like an army there, 80, 90 police, from local police, provincial police, government, federal police, the Navy. It's like they've surrounded that place like Fort Knox right now.
Yeah, and it was amazing how inventive you were with creating those cameras for the Cove, in the rocks. And
yeah, I think Rolling Stone magazine said it's the Cove is a cross between Born Identity and Flipper.
Yeah, for sure. Something else that was in the Cove was, the parts around the high level of mercury that is absorbed by the dolphins, and that fraudulent activity of selling that off as more expensive fish. But it's particularly an issue, high levels of mercury, especially for pregnant women. And I think a lot of pregnant women obviously wouldn't be having seafood. It's one of the recommendations. But in general, we're seeing a lot more people consuming fish, right? And we also seeing that the fish are consuming plastics, microplastics. The fish actually don't produce the omega oils themselves. They're getting it from, the plants in the sea. So what's your feeling about that? More on the health side, I would say.
Well, I mean, there's a couple issues you brought up. I'll just bring up one at a time. First of all, I think that, films can be the most powerful weapon we have to create social change. When we did that movie, the quota for dolphins and porpoises were about 23,000 a year. So 23,000 dolphins and porpoises being served up, a lot of them to the school systems. So even though they have anywhere from 5 to 5,000 times more mercury than allowed by Japanese law, if it was a fish. Of course, the loophole is these are mammals. And you can go to the Japanese Ministry of Health's website and see the recommendations for how much, dolphin meat a pregnant woman should eat. And it's poison, it's toxic. It's like saying, how many cigarettes should you, smoke, or how many drinks of, how many, gallons of alcohol should you drink a month if you're pregnant. It's like, it's absurd, it's insane. But first of all, that stopped because of the film and the activism around it. They're no longer serving toxic dolphin meat to school kids, actually force feeding them, because you have to eat everything on your plate in Japan. You can't, it's not like, I don't know, the UK or the US, but you eat what you want to. And you could, even in Japan, you can't even bring your own lunch. You had to eat, they force fed you to eat the toxic dolphin meat there. That's no longer happening. And I think the last time that I saw a stat for how many dolphins they killed, it's been a reduction of about 93% since that film came out. So films are changing the world, to answer your question. And about the microplastics, obviously another big issue. Plastics are a huge issue. The last 2 times I went sailing, I never even jumped in the water. I was off the coast of Italy, one of the most, Positano, one of the most beautiful coastlines, the Amalfi Coast. And, I'd be at the edge and I'd just be looking at plastic garbage in 3 dimensions and floating through from probably the Naples River. And I never hopped in the water. I was there for like a couple days, and we sailed off to the south of France, same thing. So, and this is what you can see. Now, microplastics, what you brought up, are another issues. And this is, again, this goes to this pollution blanket of the fossil fuel industry. Not only is it hurting the atmosphere, not only is it, plastics, in the next few decades is going to outweigh the weight of fish in the oceans, plastic will. But we're doing a film right now on plastic pollution solutions. And this is all very new data. They're finding out in the last couple months of papers have come out. And scientists used to think that plastic has never crossed the blood-brain barrier, but now they just didn't have the tools to measure it. Now they do. And they're finding out that people with, that have people with ADHD, dementias like Louie Psihoyos disease or Alzheimer's, they have about 4 times more plastic in their body than the rest of the population. So there seems to be a correlation between plastics, which is an offshoot of the fossil fuel industry, and your personal health. So, and here's another thing. And I want to get the stats right, but you have genetically identical mice that are given the same diet and exposed the same amount of exercise, but one of the mice is exposed to microplastics. It's about 76% fatter than the other mouse, with everything being equal. And now, so it's called an obesogen, plastics affect the genetics, your own genetics, and it triggers on these, I guess these systems that, that make your fat cells permanent. And not only does it change the fat cells of that individual mice for that generation, it affects 4 generations down. So it not only affects you, it affects your children 4 generations from now. Wow. So that's, the idea that this is all new data. It's not real. Well, the one on the mice is probably a few years old, but the one about the blood-brain barrier is within the last several months.
Yeah. And do you have any comments about the omega oils as well? People, consuming that for their joint health, and obviously you don't need that coming from fish.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried some alternatives from you can incubate or do in a bioreactor. You can make algae, you can make animal cells without destroying the animal, without the middleman. Essentially, you can take the feather of a chicken, like a jungle fowl, which is the original animal that the chicken was from. It'll taste better, and you can use that and put it in a bioreactor and make a chicken breast. They're doing that now. It's in Singapore. A company called Just is doing it, and they're the first company in the world to have the permits, the regulations in place, so that you can actually go to a restaurant now and buy chicken that's made cell-based.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk now a little bit about the new food series that you're working on?
Yeah, we're about to sign up with Netflix. It's a 4-part series on food, sort of taking off from, it won't be like the Game Changers where we use, professional athletes like Dotsie Bausch. It'll be, we did that film and people say, oh, well, I didn't, I didn't become vegan because I'm not an athlete. Now, if you're really watching closely on the film, and not even that closely, James Wilkes's father in that film has a heart attack, and because he's eaten the old way with a lot of animal products, and he got him on it. James got his dad on a whole foods plant-based diet, and it starts to reverse it. And that's kind of the story. That's kind of that pivot that we couldn't plan on, right? But that's, then that makes us go down another route where we give the diet, a whole foods plant-based diet, to 30 firefighters, and we take their, or just for 7 days, so 21 meals for each person for, and you give them the meal, you get, ask them to exercise, but they're really not changing anything except their diet. And I think the average cholesterol, total cholesterol went down like 21 points. They dropped like 6 or 7 pounds. Their collective blood pressure went down in 7 days. This isn't like your body just wants to heal. That's the cool thing. If you give it the right fuel, it's just like Lewis Hamilton, who's the #1 Formula 1 driver in the world right now. I don't know if he's overtaken the other ones, but like one of the best, drivers in the world. He told that he's a vegan now, and it's actually a lot of work driving a car that's going, pulling all those G's, like 5 or 6 G's, I believe. It's like 5 or 6 times your body weight that you're holding off of every turn, right? So it's a lot. People don't realize it, but it's a physical endurance race to drive a Formula 1. Not only you have to have mental sharpness, but he feels this gives him an edge, over all the other drivers who are probably eating meat.
Bro.
Hey, Louis, I'm sorry. Listen, Louis, I'm sorry. Cool, I'm sorry. Look, here's the deal. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me, man. All right? You already won, man. Just say something for other people. Say some stuff for other people.
Bro. Listen, let's go.
You black, I'm black, and nobody gonna know the difference. I got it.
I got a race. No, seriously.
I'm sorry, Louis. I'm sorry.
You better win, man. You better win! Win out!
He says it's about like having the right fuel in the tank. It's such a simple analogy, right? #1 race car driver in the world, he's not going to put crappy fuel in his tank and try to be high performance. we're designed to be primarily plant eaters. Yeah, you can eat, you can eat loads of stuff that's bad for you, but if you look at our chompers, you look at our digestive system, everything that's done, it matches the body mechanics of a gorilla more than it does a lion, right? So we should be eating more like a gorilla and less like a lion. We're not lions.
No, definitely not. And so other than that, also that food series that you're working on, you mentioned a few other documentaries, but any that you want to expand a little bit more on?
Yeah, well, we at the end of Racing Extinction, we did these projection events. Remember, this was like 6 years ago. We projected endangered species on the Empire State Building, and we did that to alert the world, kind of like the bat signal. That
Yeah.
when you put an endangered species, let's say a 60-story tall golden lion tamarin on the Empire State Building, there's a resonance that happens there. Like, this was important. One of the greatest symbols of human achievement at the time, and capitalism, and you put up an animal against it, it says this is important too.
Yeah, yeah.
By
the way, I liked it when you had King Kong climbing up as well.
that was a bit of an Easter egg. We wanted to make a reference to that. Yeah, that was all Trammell Threlkel, the guy who made it all happen. This a creative genius. So I think we were told by our distributor that because we already did projections on the United Nations, which were pretty phenomenal. So we got hundreds of thousands of media views, but we thought the Empire State Building, there's something special about that. And our distributor and the producer said, well, in August in New York, the media won't show up because they can't afford to pay the overtime on a Saturday night because it gets dark late in the summer. And in August in New York, all the important people are going to be over in the Hamptons, it'll be over in Europe, so it'll be a non-event. We did it anyway. I mortgaged my home to help pay for those projections. We had a lot of help, but those were expensive, over $1 million. But it was important to me that we, not just use it for the end of the film, but we get serious to try to not just make a film, but start a movement. I think we had 939 million media views by Thursday. So within 5 days, it was a top trending story on Facebook and Twitter for 4 days worldwide. And we thought we couldn't get any more attention to the subject than that. And then the Pope called. The Pope wanted us to project images of the endangered species on the Vatican. Now remember, Pope Francis is named after St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of animals. So he wanted to remind world leaders while they were at COP in Paris, deciding on the limits for carbon dioxide, that more was at stake than just humans. And I think we had 4.4 billion media views in that. We had 600 media there, 225,000 people, at the Vatican looking at this live. And now I think, I know that there's laws that were passed because of the projections that prevent some of the most endangered species from entering U.S. ports. And I know the climate movie was inspired by some of the people, the young people in that by that film. So, films are, really important to help shape, our consciousness. Now, the UN has asked us to do a 3-day event in advance of the COP26. And this is like using the east side of the building, so facing proud on the East River with the whole New York skyline in the background. So we have it for 3 days. So we'll be talking about the virtues of a plant-based diet. We'll be talking about solutions to plastic pollution. We'll be using that one of the biggest canvases in the world, to basically give solutions to the climate crisis that we're facing right now. So I'm that's the next call I have after this. Just mad about doing that. We're looking for funding for it. That's always the biggest part of our, we have these great ideas. We know we can reach billions of people. So billions of media views, it translates to hundreds of millions of people. Now we can do it with solutions. When we did the Vatican and the Empire State Building, they wouldn't allow us to use words or messages or even music at the Vatican. So we had to use like animal songs. It was still very powerful, but now we can do messaging. We can use QR codes so we can be in touch with people. We can, so if anybody wants to help out, go to our organization, and a little bit of pitch for that. But like, listen, we're trying to change the world, right? It's like, we're at the Oceanic Preservation Society. You can find us at opsociety.org. I just feel like this is the one way that I know that we can communicate with the world, at scale. Because like we know that there's solutions out there, but because we're working with the UN, we're going to be working with the same translators that they use for that UN Security Council meeting. So you'll be able to go on to see it live stream. You'll be able to click on Russian or Chinese or Spanish and the UN languages, and hear people from around the globe coming together to talk about plant-based diet, to talk about solutions to the plastic problem, et cetera, and these are all hopeful things, that you can make plastics out of anything, right? It doesn't have to be fossil fuels, anything organic, you make it out of algae. I have algae straws here that are great, if you need to use a straw. So the solutions are upgrades, and that's what I'm excited by, is that we can, I think we found a way with the projections to speak to the world positively about the changes that we need to make in the time frame that we need to make it. The Secretary General says we have 10 years to reverse what's going on, and I believe him. You look at the data, we can't afford a 2-degree centigrade world. It's severely degraded by for future generations. We shouldn't do that. I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday in Germany. He said that Germany just last week passed a law that young people can sue the government if they're passing laws that are detrimental to future generations.
Wow.
That's new. That's really new. So it's almost like future generations and nature now has a seat at the table of government, which is how it should be. So because these externalities that Adam Smith was talking about weren't factored in. Now that the next generation is saying, we care about this stuff. We care about the environment. We care about animals being needlessly sacrificed for meals. We care about electrifying our transportation system and getting onto smart grids. They care about this stuff, and they'll be voting with their dollars and their pounds and their other denominations, their bitcoins. It's a new world coming for sure.
Sure. And yeah, so I just want to say, really appreciate the work that you're putting in for this really important topic for everybody. And we definitely need to stop humans being the asteroid to destroy our own planet at the moment. Yeah, really appreciate it. And if anyone's watching and wants to contribute towards the projection for the UN building, then I'll put the link up on the notes as well. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Good seeing you. Cheers.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.